question. Milo at Berkeley. Wow, that was amazing. Well, I guess I will just point out the obvious that that was one of the best things that could have ever happened to Milo in terms of proving his points, both the legitimate and illegitimate ones, and raising his stature, right? I mean, just what a short-sighted, idiotic, counterproductive thing to do. And what worries me about this moment politically is that the left seems capable of doing everything wrong in response to the rise of the so-called alt-right and the Trump presidency. This antipathy to free speech, this idea that rioting to prevent a lecture is an example of liberal free speech in action. And that is just so confused and destructive that I'm tempted to say that the left is just irredeemable at this point. There seems to be so little insight. And coming fresh out of my interview with Bill Maher, I can see this. I mean, there are people who have tweeted at me and written to me who heard in my discussion with Bill a horrifying expression of racist hatred, or are pretending to have heard such a thing. And this kind of judgment is again, echoed by the usual suspects on the left. I mean, that position is so crazy that I just don't know how to interact with it. So it's not an accident that people on the right can't see any way to interact with it. I mean, all I can say is that if I'm a bigot and a racist and a xenophobe, if that's how I appear to you based on what I said on Real Time, what words are you going to use for the real bigots and racists and xenophobes? And what I've said before about Milo is at this point, kind of a professional troll, right? I mean, some of his criticism of the left is no doubt sincere, but he's a kind of performance artist. I mean, he's just winding up the left. And, perhaps I've missed it, but I haven't seen anything from him that is real racist bigotry. Please take this caveat on board. I have not read all of Milo's stuff or much of it. Maybe there's something I've missed. Feel free to point that out to me. But the Milo I've seen is very far from being a neo-Nazi or someone whose attitudes are truly of the right. That's probably not an accident. I mean, he's flamboyantly gay and half Jewish, I believe. I don't know how right-wing he could be in the end. But this response at Berkeley wouldn't even be warranted if he was actually a KKK member. Again, the moment you're using violence to prevent someone from speaking, you are on the wrong side of the argument, by definition. How is that not obvious on the left at this moment? I mean, you're going to, burn down your own university to prevent someone from expressing views that you could otherwise just criticize? All of these protests were seen in response to right-wing or quasi-right-wing speakers being invited to college campuses by, I'm sure, the campus Republicans. These are so uncivil and unproductive. And again, this is almost entirely a phenomenon of the left. If you heard generically that some college campus had erupted in violence because a student mob had prevented a lecture from taking place, and the people who wanted to hear that lecture were spat upon as they tried to enter the hall and finally attacked, you could bet with 99% confidence that this was coming from the left. Now, in the age of Trump, when you really want to be able to say things against creeping right-wing authoritarianism, having an authoritarian anti-free speech movement subsume the left is a disaster politically. But I actually think the left is irredeemable at this point. And this is why I've begun to use the phrase the new center. I think we need a new center to our politics. I mean, I don't know how you ever get the people writing for The Intercept or the people on the Young Turks to be reasonable human beings, given what they've done in recent years. And so that's the left, as it currently stands. Of course, it's no accident that the Women's March, which otherwise seemed like a great thing, was vitiated by its alliance with Linda Sarsour and these closeted and semi-closeted Islamists who have co-opted the women's movement and convinced millions of women, apparently, that the hijab is a sign of women's empowerment. That's fairly mind-boggling. Just so there's no confusion on this point, I think you, dear listener, should be free to wear the hijab if you want to, but you should also recognize that most women the world over who are veiled to one or another degree are living that way not out of choice, or certainly not out of what could be considered a free choice. They're living in the context of a community that will treat them like whores or worse if they don't veil themselves, right? That's not the political empowerment of women. And someone like Linda Sarsour, again, one of the principal organizers of the Women's March, is a theocrat who lies about this, who attacks Ayaan Hirsi Ali. This is how the left will die, by, on the basis of its own moral relativism, locking arms with Islamism and stealth theocracy, which is what it has done. I mean, just as you know, if you travel too far right on the political spectrum, you will encounter the most repulsive, the most callous, the most authoritarian attitudes. I think you should know that if you travel too far left, you will encounter a kind of moral confusion and identity politics that is, in its actual application to the world, little better. And I don't see how that changes at this point.